Jake, maybe let's start with Jan Hendrik. He's obviously been out for quite a while. But having him on the bench there, has he been training? Has he been had any action since the box? Or
No, I remember he had that, so he got that injury, hurt his foot. So he's been out. So that's probably why he's on the bench as well. I was thinking of starting him, but put him on the bench, and hopefully, if things go well, he can get 30 minutes, 35 minutes this weekend. So, but he's fine, ready to go. It's, it's one of those syndesmosis injuries that they had an operation, which means it's a genuine 8-week injury. But he's been pushed by the conditioning coaches and all that sort of thing. So they're comfortable, obviously running-wise and mobility-wise, he'll be fine.
And just in your loose trio, Marcel coming in, he obviously had a good second half showing as well. Showed he was, in those conditions, he was one of the guys who stood up. Did that get him the nod as well, or was it just...
Yeah, I thought he played really well in both those games, And then Maku's gone off for an operation now. He's also gone for an ankle operation. And then Pilo is obviously suspended still from the red card. Nazam Kar had appendicitis. Not that it means anything, but in terms of why he's been selected, so at this point in time he's played well. Those other guys are not available. So it gives us a chance to give him another start. But he's been captain of us, and he's played in this tournament many times as well for us and for other clubs. So I'm sure he'll be fine.
Given the way this competition is run, teams tend to keep their team sheets close to their chest till Friday afternoons. Do you have you heard if Northampton's brought their full side? And because they were quite impressive against Cust last week.
Well, the one thing about rugby is that they've got to check into hotels, and they've got to send their team lists, and they've got to make sure that their rooming lists are through. And so even, I'm talking about everybody. So even if you think you're not showing your hand, generally overseas sides will know when you land here and when they see players around. So when you see Alex Mitchell and Furbank and Freeman and then walking around shopping centres and obviously then all English internationals are here. So look, I'm expecting no different from Northampton. They said they want to take this competition seriously. They got to the last knockout stages last year. They want to go another level up. So I'm not expecting anything different from the fact that they're going to rest anybody or rotate anybody. I would predict that they're going to bring the strongest possible 23.
And just on that, do you feel just the fact that obviously the Heat being at home now, home comforts, Loftus, all the familiarities, that should give you guys a boost this week?
Well, it will give us a boost, Brendan. It's not a case of trying and making it up. Playing at Saracens, 4G, wind howling, 450 k's an hour, trying to get out of your own half. Those were the elements we have to compete with. But I suppose that's what's so nice about this Investec Challenge is you can play 1 week at -1 degrees. The next week you play against another team when it's 35 degrees. You play at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when it's daylight. And you play, 5:30 in England when it's pitch black. So I suppose that's why when you win this competition, you deserve to win it, because there's so many starting the competition in, December, finishing it in the summer months in Europe. Just shows you how adept you have to be, or adept you have to be with your squad. So I'm sure that the bonus we have of playing at altitude in front of our home crowd on a hard ground that's at 3 o'clock in the daytime with 35 degrees is as beneficial to us as it is for those European sides to play in those sort of rainy, wet, slow conditions. And we didn't adapt well enough last week. But the challenge is, whether or not teams that come here can adapt to what elements we give them.
Just the last one for me, just on the Saracens game, because we haven't spoken to you since.
Yes.
Were you disappointed with some of your senior players, the way they adapted in those conditions? The guys maybe you would have expected to.
Brendan, I think that the thing, the TV probably didn't give you a fair reflection of what it was like out there. When we lost the toss, I almost knew that's it, we're not going to win. And it's not defeatist. The fact that we had them under the pump in the beginning, we scored a try, and they were under the pump, under their poles the whole time. When it went 8-5 at half time, I realised that's not enough. It was almost like a 20-point win. And they handled it better. It was nothing to do with our players. I think that if we had won the toss and we had played the way we wanted to play with a win in the second half, I think they would have been under pressure as well. And then, on top of that, we lost Johannes to concussion. We lost Kobus to concussion. We lost Marku with a hamstring injury. There are not many teams that can go to Saracens, play into a wind lose 3 players like that, 3 forwards like that, in conditions like that, and then still expect that you're going to get everything right. So when you say to me about you lose 3 forwards, any team loses 3 forwards like that into a wind, then the guys like Willie and Johan Goosen and whoever are the decision makers, it becomes bloody tough for them. So I wasn't surprised that. The thing that stands out in my mind is how happy Saracens were when they won and the final whistle went. That says a lot for the club, for us, because I don't think Saracens usually behave like that when they get a win against most teams, which shows you, teams are taking us seriously, which is always a good sign.
Cool.
Jake, will there be a bit of a revenge talk in your team talk on Saturday morning?
No, I don't talk about revenge, Carl. It's all these sort of old days about where we don't like them, they don't like us, all that sort of stuff. For me, rugby is different. Rugby is, you got to enjoy it. They beat us last year. They beat us fair and square. I don't know why there'd be a revenge. The point is we went there with a team. They beat us comfortably. They moved on to the next level of the competition. Now they come to Loftus. So, as I said earlier, if you're going to win this Investec Champions Cup, you're going to have to be good enough to play against different teams in different elements, on different time zones, on different days, sometimes Friday nights versus Sunday afternoons, So it's just whatever happened last year is actually immaterial. Last year, I think Courtly Laws was their captain. He's not even playing. So, it shows you, whatever happened last year is immaterial. And I think if it goes to, we'll get to the stage where I have team talks where we talk about revenge and all that sort of stuff, that doesn't work with players today, And some of them can't even remember what they did last week, so I'm sure they won't even remember what happened last year.
And what do you expect from the Saints?
No, well, I expect them. They've got 5 current international backs. You go the Mitchell, Furbank, Freeman, and then the other backs that are there were very dangerous last year when they carved us to pieces. So, I suppose that what I'm really looking forward to is to see whether they can play that way at altitude in a 35-degree heat. It'll be, caps off to them. If they can come to Loftus, run like they want to run, play like they want to play, and can play, and then beat us, well, then you got to say then they're a good team. But altitude, heat, travel, those are all the things that are up against every team that comes here. We just got to make sure that we use that in our favour.
And Saturday is a must-win for you.
Every Saturday is a must-win for us, Carl. That's what I always tell you.
In the competition.
Yeah, but when you play for the Bulls every weekend, even if we play a friendly, we want to win. Even if we play a pre-season game, we want to win. So, in fact, to be honest, it's actually not a must-win game because we could actually lose and still make the playoffs. So, there's no exact science about you must win this one and you can lose that one. The way this competition is, you could sneak in by getting 1 win. I'm not saying we want that, but so. For the Bulls, we want to win every week. It doesn't matter whether it's whether it's a URC game, whether it's an Investec Champions Cup game, we want to win.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
So just on Saracens last week, you are a very experienced coach for the World Cup. You would not have gone into that match with the game plan that played out on the field, if you know what I'm saying.
No,
you knew what to do there.
No.
But it didn't happen
No.
in terms of the kicking and the likes, because you had to win in your back, you had to make sure you kick out and everything else. There was a bit of a disconnect there in terms of, do you think it was a lack of experience, maybe by the captain? I want to ask that question.
I don't know if we've got enough time, but I'll give you a quick rugby lesson quickly. Saracens got a really good defence. They're very narrow and they chase you hard off the line. When the wind's blowing at 50 k's an hour, the space that you can take is outside them and over them. But if you can't get the ball there, you're dead. So it was one of those games where their strength was even accentuated by the fact that, Willie said he looked up and the last defender was standing 10 meters from him. There was nothing between the last defender and the touchline, but he couldn't get the ball there because if you kick it, it goes backwards. So, I'm not making excuses, but of course it looked at times like we were trying to play things that, because the reality was we thought pre-game that we would get around them and we'd expose them on the edges because they're so narrow. But as it turned out, with 50k wins and above, it was impossible to get the ball there. So it looked like very one-dimensional. It looked like guys trying to bash each other. It looked like guys at times trying to force it to go around them, which then we dropped the ball. So I would imagine that a supporter or someone watching that game would go, gee, we look naive, and gee, we, as Brendan says, the leaders are not taking charge or whatever. But I can tell you, the homework was right. We saw where we could beat them. The execution was more difficult than people give it credit for. That's all I'm saying. It wasn't that whatever we thought we were going to see, we saw. The fact that we couldn't do it was nothing to do with inexperience or panicking, or it was the fact that it was just so tough to do it. And I mean, you saw what they did. I mean, they when they got the ball in the second half, I saw a stat. They made something like 200 tackles and missed 40. We made 140 tackles and missed 15. Now, just that stat alone tells you which team is the team that you thought would win that game. And that in itself just meant that they managed it better. But that had nothing to do with that's the way they play. They play like that even if it's dry. They defend like that even if there's no wind. So it just, as I said, was accentuated by the fact that the space we saw, we couldn't get there, and it wasn't through any other reason that the conditions just didn't allow us to get it there.
Even in the first half with the wind in your back.
Yeah, even in the first half. So I mean, when we did get to the edge there, we scored. But I think, and I don't want to make excuses, when we had them under the pump in the first half and we got slow ball and they weren't rolling away and they were offsides, we didn't get that love. But the second half, I think we got one yellow card for not rolling away against us. Yeah. We got 3 offside penalties from the touch judge because they had us under the same pump that we had them in the first half. We didn't get that in the first half. And I'm not, again, it's just the way it is. And you got to understand. You're probably going to get it as the game evolves in the second half. And it's like that in all games. As the referees start to get a feel and as the referees understand, it becomes easier to make those calls. You don't often get a yellow card in the first 5 minutes of a game for not rolling away. I mean, it's no attack on anybody. That's just the way our game's played. So that's why I really wanted to play with a win in the second half. I wanted to be able to put them there and make the ref make calls at the end of the game when the game was on the line. But I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah,
but the reality was whatever you saw there was not because the homework was perfect. When we see the clips and you go in the change room and you show them how much space we have, it's easy to show them. But when Willie says, well, we can't get it there. If I throw it like that, it goes backwards. If I try and kick it there, even chips over the top, which became difficult because, you chip it over and it almost comes back to you again. So it was one of those games where I don't think we'll ever play in conditions like that again.
I've never seen posts moving around like that. I could see on TV.
Well, that guy hit the post from in front.
Exactly.
The reason it was there and then it wasn't there. Yeah. So, it was very difficult.
Just on the subject of play depth now, you mentioned last week the difference between your player 30 and your player 55, and that's all to do with budgets. And we had a bit of a look at budgets this week compared to the French teams and the likes. How can you ever compete on a level playing field? That's my. Are there any plans about it?
The only way we'll ever compete, and I've told you, I've banged this drum, is when all the Springboks come back to play. So in other words, when the Andre Liebenbergs that are at Leicester come back to the Bulls, and Erke Steymans come back to the Bulls, and Peter, and Andre Pollard come back to the Bulls, and Jesse Krill come back to the Bulls. And the reason they have to come back to the Bulls is because we want to pick locally based players. That's the only way we'll ever get back there. And I know you guys obviously, say it over and over, but that's the only way. It can never ever be. I think one thing I found out the other day, which I didn't realize, salary caps are not only there to keep teams from getting bigger and stronger. It's to make sure that smaller teams don't spend too much. Otherwise, what happens is the head office ends up carrying the can, just like they did with Province, or just like they did with, provinces that fold. So, until we can get to the point, the only solution, because you're not going to say, but Mr. Rupert and Mr. Motsepe will put more money in and we'll have 120 million and we'll buy the best players in the world. That sounds romantic, but it's not going to happen. The only way it's going to happen is if those players who want to play for South Africa come back and play for the 4 franchises. You guys do your homework. If you see already what the Wilco Lows and the Andre Estezens and the Eben Etzebeths that were overseas have done to our franchises, imagine if you multiplied that by another 15, 20 players per franchise. Because that's basically what will happen. Those 15, 20 players come back. which means the 15, 20 that are now in ours would go down one level to the Currie Cup and to those SA teams, SA Cup teams. And then all that happens, your rugby becomes stronger. But that's not, I don't make those calls. All I can do is I wear my Bulls cap and I say to you, if I want to win this competition and we want to win the Investec Champions Cup, which is this beautiful trophy, how do you compete with Toulouse that have 25, 26 internationals in their warm-up squad? In other words, when they go on the field, every guy's an international. I mean, how do you, the only way is you bring back every international that's playing overseas back home. That's the only way it can happen. And until we do that, yes, we might, I'm going to say it, yes, we might get to a knockout stage and have an outstanding game and we can beat one of those top teams. But I'm going to genuinely ask you, do you think our squads are strong enough to beat Toulon in the quarterfinals, then beat Toulouse in the semi-finals and then beat Leinster in a final, or La Rochelle in the quarterfinals, Toulouse in a semi-final and, Saracens in a final? All I'm saying is it's highly unlikely that 3 consecutive games, I know they're not on weekends, but 3 consecutive massive games with URC knockout games, that you're going to have a squad that's going to be strong enough to do that.
One last question about depth now. We spoke about the resting periods and the compulsory leaves, and we were talking about sort of middle March, April next year. You're going to start having problems with players being rested and injuries. And now this tournament is sort of haphazard in between everything else. So how do you get your guys motivated, number one, and number two, how do you make sure that you actually get there and have the players to compete with?
Okay, so I suppose I've got the lady from Investec here. That's not a haphazard thing. I mean, but I meant it like this. It's one of those tournaments that our public haven't grasped yet.
Yeah.
It's the opportunity to play in the biggest club competition. It's like football. And as I said to you before, footballers leave their clubs if their club doesn't qualify for Champions League. And that's part of their contracts. And this is, the bottom line, as I said to the players last week when we played Saracens, this is test rugby in a provincial jersey. That's all it is. It's test rugby, 20 internationals, 25 internationals, and all you're doing is you're playing your club jersey. So the point I'm making is that it's a hell of a competition, and it is where it is now because of the fact that you earn the right to play this time of the year in this competition. It is a completely different animal for us because of rest periods, because of Springboks having to have time off, because of 3 competitions. And it's not for me to say whether or not it's right or wrong. It is a difficult one. But let's be fair. The teams like Toulouse and Saracens and those teams need to play Six Nations as well. And we don't play Six Nations. So in February, March, just before the April block, which is the knockout stages, they too play international rugby and we don't. So there's never a right time for everyone to fit into the calendar. But I don't want to sound like, again, that I've told you guys many times, but until we get the best players here, and because then you can rest guys and rotate guys, I said last week, the difference between our number 30 player and our number 55 player is much bigger than the teams that have got massive budgets. And, that's why they can afford to rotate, bring guys in, when you've got to give your 5 or 6 or 8 Springboks, 8 weeks off in a year, and you have to then play everyone in the competition because you don't have, it makes it hell of a difficult, But, that doesn't mean we're not going to take it seriously. That doesn't mean we're going to not see how far we can go in this competition. Because the one thing that I have seen, like we've beaten Leinster twice now in big games, so we have the ability to beat anybody on any day. Whether we have the depth to win 3 massive games and play URC playoff games at that same time of the year, that the only way we'll know is if we blood guys and make sure that our squad gets stronger and stronger. That's the only way we're going to find out. And it's funny enough, I was speaking to our coaches today. If one guy pulls out today, like Marco's had an operation, or Mpilo's been suspended, well, the show must go on. All we got to do is make sure that when we get to the last 3 weeks of this competition, which is quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals, that we have our best 23 available. That is the managing part that we need to do as coach. And I suppose as director, that's what I've got to be comfortable with, is that whatever we do now, rest-wise, rotation-wise, experimental-wise, is that by the time we get to when it's do or die, we must have the best 23.
Well, Zach, I hope you have a good birthday present.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Coach, I was going to ask similar questions, but just to sort of maybe rephrase on the Springbok resting periods. As a coach, for you personally, do you feel as if maybe they should be more flexible to assist where a team is at a particular time in the season? If, let's say, you've got a massive game in a group stage or in a latter stage of the Euro stage, you need some of your big boys, but the resting period is on you. Is there even a conversation that can be had that can make it a little bit more relaxed for you to take a chance or two on some of them?
Yeah, look, and I'll tell you which I've really appreciated. I was the Springbok coach, and I couldn't understand why the unions were so cross with me when I used to pick certain players, and now I understand because I've got older and I've realised that there's got to be a win-win. Can there be? I highly doubt it. And I'll tell you why. Because when you go on individual basis, it's not as easy as what you think. So I'll give you an example. Let's just say you want to give player A off the next 4 weeks, and he gets injured tomorrow and he's out for 3 months. Well, then when do you give him off? And the thing is that the 3 months that he's injured doesn't count as the 3 weeks he's off. So that thing changes from fixture to fixture. Get suspended like Kumedi gets suspended now. Is that leave, or is that mean that you? And I know, for argument's sake, he's not a Springbok, but the reality is he still needs his 8 weeks leave due to my players. So what I'm saying is I understand that it would be fantastic if you could go on individual basis, but you know what happens. You know, if they allow me to play Wilco and they don't allow the Stormers to play Salman Murat, or they allow Salman Murat to play and they don't allow Wilco to play, then you create a problem for yourself. And I remember that when I was the national coach, is you give 2 players off to go back and play Currie Cup, and you don't give the 2 that the other unions want, then what happens is they say, why did you let the 2 that are playing against us go, but our 2 that we wanted, you didn't let go, And the other thing which I suppose I've got to say is those days we had centralised contracts, and Brendan will remember, we had centralised contracts. So it was only X amount of guys who had money that were paid by SA Rugby. So then it was probably a bit easier. Now you've got probably 60, 70, 80 guys on pony money. So which ones do you rest? Which ones do you rotate? Which ones do you... So it's a lot tougher now to manage, I think, because of that. And by the way, and also those years we had no overseas-based players. So it also made it much easier. Every guy that was managed was being managed by us, as in by SA Rugby. I didn't have to phone a Japanese club or an English club and ask them to give, one of the Springboks time off or weeks off, So it's a good question, but I just generally think that it's so difficult now to manage that I don't think you'll ever get to a situation where individually, because imagine if I phone and say, can I please play this guy? I know we're supposed to have 3 weeks off. Some unions would say, well, then I also want to do that. And then it has happened. It has happened. I'll be honest. It has happened. Like Rugby's, for argument's sake, Rugby's went on this tour with us at the end of the year. In other words, he stayed and that's because we had Jan Hendrik got injured. Jan Hendrik hurt his foot. So it does happen. But that doesn't mean he doesn't get leave. I'm going to have to find Rugby's like 4 weeks leave and then 2 weeks leave and then 3 weeks leave again. So the problem doesn't go away. It just comes back later.
And just looking at your bench, Dion Slovic comes in as well. It's lock cover. You've got a plethora of locks at the union. What does he bring that's different? What are you looking for?
Well, he calls lineouts, number 1. Number 2 is he played. Funny enough, I was looking when we played Saracens here last year and we won. He was in the group. So he's been in this tour competition and he's been part of a team that's won against really good teams. So he's been with us for a while now. He's been with us for about 5-6 weeks. So it's not like he's just come in. And he's older. He's a bit older. He's keen to make it. That's also always a good thing when you see a player wants to make it. So I'm sure he'll be fine.
And lastly, number club as well is inclusion. Number 20. Is that something to do with maybe the breakdown in the latter stages of the game? Could he be key if it comes to that?
Well, they play with pace. They play quickly and they want to move the ball around. I think they've got the quickest rack speed in the competition so far. And I'm not about this competition, I think even in the Premiership. So to have a guy like Nama on the field that can get in there and slow it up will be very important for us. And with Marco out, it was always inevitable that he has to get a chance. And then Marco being out now, he'll get more and more game time because Marco obviously will be out for a while with his ankle. So he's been patient. I mean, he's also hasn't been easy for him. He swapped unions, came here, and he's expected, to play. And I told him, just be patient, and so he'll get a chance, and hopefully he'll get a lot of minutes tomorrow.